So I'm not gonna lie, I'm not super excited to review this episode. Not because it's bad necessarily, because if my memory serves me correctly, it's actually okay. But that's sort of the issue. An okay episode doesn't really seem like something I can get much substance from. Like, if I'm not wrong, this episode is fine, but the second part is just so much better. Like, compared to the last two-part I reviewed, which was abysmal, or the one before that was pretty great, but I couldn't just review the Zygon inversion and skip the first part. That would be so lame. But anyway, let's hope that this part of the story is much better than I remember it, because I don't know if I can handle another bad Capaldi story after those last two. The episode starts on a pretty good recap of the 50th, reminding us of the events of that story involving the Zygons, which this story will obviously be continued, which I think is a really interesting subject to tackle. However, wouldn't you have thought that this story should have been done a lot sooner? The 50th came out 2 years before this story came out. I can kind of understand the reasoning for doing this so far apart as well, because Series 8 was seemingly the start of a new era, and having one of 12's first stories be something directly linked to something that came before probably wouldn't have been the best idea. But on the other hand, literally the first story in Series 8 has the villain plan ripped off from the girl in the fireplace, and the second story desperately trying to be Dalek from Series 1. Okay, so we're not really off to a good start, but the scene establishing that 20 million Zygons have been allowed to take human form and live as people in the UK is pretty great. And this video has been made just in case something goes wrong. And obviously we know that the events of this shitty Series 8 finale led to one of the Osgood's death, and that will be directly involved with this story, which is a nice little bit of continuity from Moffat. Thank you, Moffat. Very cool. Making this universe actually feel consistent for once. Something he doesn't do with the Time Lords later, but we'll get to that in 8 weeks. However, that one good bit of setup is immediately ruined by this shitty looking grave. Like, what the fuck is this? My sister? Couldn't this literally just apply to anyone's sister? Is this everyone's sister's grave on Earth? And why is it even named like this? Worst version of Malcolm, I mean Osgood, did have a name, believe it or not. This is a terrible bit of design shown in the episode. Like, there's not even any dates on the fucking thing. Seriously, what happened here? Also, Osgood was disintegrated. You don't bury ashes. And maybe if Osgood was a super public figure and her death needed to be covered up, I'd understand this. But she isn't. This is just a terrible detail. Like, if it was just a gravestone, fine, it would be fine. But since her ashes will be irretrievable because the fucking ship blew up, this doesn't make any sense. This just seems so lazy and poorly thought out. We then cut to current day Osgood, and she seemingly gets killed by a Zygon, just after she texts the doctor about the nightmare scenario. In this really poorly expressed scene, and what I mean by that is, this is supposed to be amidst a war of some description, yet we see absolutely none of it whatsoever. The closest we get to seeing any sort of violence is seeing a brick get thrown through a window. So the scene really doesn't feel tense at all until the Zygon comes in the room. And even then, this design is still a little hard to take seriously, especially this weird laser thing. And now that I've brought it up, I might as well talk about the design of the Zygons themselves, because, not gonna lie, I still think they're way too hard to take seriously, because they just look a bit goofy. Like, don't get me wrong, they look much better than the spray-painted Cheerio ones from the 70s, and they definitely give the design a lot of attention to detail to make them look scarier, but even when I was 11, first seeing this episode, I couldn't get scared by these things. Also, don't get me wrong here, they aren't on the level of Monty Python from The Girl Who Died or The Cowardly Lion from The Woman Who Lived. They just aren't the greatest design ever, to be honest. After more out-of-sync guitar playing from the Doctor, and the great title sequence we see, You're telling me the same motherfucker who wrote Kill the Moon, the second worst episode of Series 8, is here writing another episode by himself? Are you fucking serious, Moffat? I'll say it again. Give as much flack to Russell as you want, you're probably fucking wrong anyway. But at least when someone wrote a shitty episode in his era, he wouldn't bring them back just because of personal biases. Moffat did this constantly, and it's one of the things that bogged down his era so much. Like, I seriously didn't need, and to be honest, I don't think he deserved, 7 more Doctor Who stories, considering every single story he's ever wrote before is one of the worst in each respective series. Talking about Mark Gatiss, by the way. And Moffat also brought back Peter Harness twice after he wrote one of the most hated episodes in history. I think the biggest testament to the guy being a shit writer is not only Kill the Moon, but this episode as well, because the Zygon invasion is filled to the brim with flaws. But the second Moffat stepped into the story, it became so much better. At this point, I just question, why didn't Moffat just write the whole story? Oh my fucking god, speaking of that, this reminds me, I'll have to rewatch Sleep No More. No.
Hello, it's Dr. Disco.
What the hell is that?
Trash.
Oh, please, never do that again, I implore you. Capaldi doesn't deserve cringe. One complaint I have with this episode, yet again, because we're only fucking 5 minutes in, is that the Doctor instantly knows who the two head Zygons are. But how? I thought that the point of the Zygons was that they could seamlessly integrate themselves in along with normal humans. Along with that fact, in this story, the Doctor can never figure out if Osgood is human or Zygon. Some would call this nitpicking, but considering I'm only 5 minutes in and I've already complained about the episode this much, these nitpicks and tiny complaints just pile and pile onto a massive, flaw mountain of criticism. Osgood's interrogation video, however, is pretty good. Except it's weird that the Zygons have two separate camera angles for this video, considering what the video is meant to represent. Like, I highly doubt terrorists who do this stuff in real life have multiple camera angles. Like, just pull a Russell here, if you want to have multiple angles, just zoom in on the fucking TV screen. We then cut to Clara and we get this awfully cheery music which is completely tone deaf considering the scene that literally just came before this. And Clara's theme is already not suiting with her character. That one fucking shit scene alone, with that like 15 seconds of music, has just killed any suspense that this episode was trying to build up. This episode is seriously so much worse than I remember it being. What the fuck happened? So Clara says that she has 127 missed calls from the Doctor, which is pretty funny, but that moment gets ruined when Clara decides to stop ringing him back when she sees a child on the stairs, and decides to go and help him. I'm sorry, but what? Like, 127 missed calls. Think about that. 127 missed calls in a stretch of about 8 or 9 hours at the most, assuming she's just came back from her job. That is a shit ton of calls. It obviously has to be something important, but she just kind of shrugs it off until she does this. Isn't one of the main plot points in this entire series meant to be Clara becoming so obsessed with the Doctor that she starts acting like him? Yet she does something so fucking blatantly dense as this. Also, the Zygon acting in this scene is really bad. Like, seriously, I'll say it again. The point of them is they're meant to integrate seamlessly. Yet these ones are so obviously the imposter that even fucking PewDiePie lies better than them. That was quite possibly the worst joke I think I've made, like, ever. Like, oh my fucking god. It's going to be even more dated when the video comes out. Fuck. The one thing this scene does do well is set up the Bonnie twist for later, which is a genuinely well done scene. But this scene initially is really poor because of the Zygon's horrible acting. And Bonnie is super convincing throughout this entire story, so it's strange that so many of them act weird in this part and the second part. After a bunch of not so subtle but good setup exposition, we find the Zygon control center, and the noise made when the Doctor starts fingering it is so realistic I really don't want to imagine how they got this sound effect.
I smelled the Zygon once. Old habits. Still got the old magic?
Really didn't need the picture in my head of the 10th Doctor fingering the Queen, but thanks. I do quite like the detail of how the other Osgood went mad with grief after the other one died, but I do wish that we got shown this instead of telling us, as it could give Ingrid Oliver the perfect chance to show off her acting capabilities and range, and make Osgood more of a character in a natural way, because she doesn't have that much of a character. Like, imagine if this episode opened on a super dramatic, no dialogue, music only scene, showing the other Osgood find out that the other one's dead and go mad with grief to the point where she just fucks off to go undercover, and then we get the shitty opening this episode actually had. So then we get a much better video by the Zygons, where we're shown how the revolution begins, much better than the last revolution I reviewed. And the conflict in this one is so much more interesting because there is actually a struggle in what to do. And unlike in the last shitty 2 episodes I reviewed, the villain's plan could actually have everlasting consequences, because the episode has set up that there are 20 million Zygons across the UK alone, and the damage could be irreparable. Another complaint I have with this episode, however, is that the place Osgood is held hostage is a fictional location, which I think dampens the effect of the story's stakes, because this episode feels very real with how it portrays terrorism sometimes. Adding a fictional location ruins that aesthetic somewhat.
It's a Trivial Pursuit question. I used to memorize Trivial Pursuit questions so I could win. That's the last place.
Okay, that's actually genius blending in from Bonnie, because let's be real, Clara is petty and pretentious enough to the point where she would do something like that. Unfortunately, this story likes to remind us that Moffat willy-nilly made the Doctor the president of the world. Check out the Death in Heaven review if you're curious as to why that's so fucking stupid. And then the Doctor ironically does the Nixon pose.
That's not supposed to happen.
Also, this is a bit of a contradiction.
I am not a hero. I'm definitely not a president.
Like, I get they try to write this off as the Doctor saying he likes pouncing about in a big ship, but let's be fucking real here, it was just an excuse for the cliffhanger. I find it a bit weird that Clara says she needs to go home to get stuff and the unit woman doesn't say, like, this is a crisis, or ask what she needs, and just goes with her. I would call this a contrived way of getting Clara and the unit people to find the Zygon base, but it could easily be argued that this was intentional manipulation from Clara so that she could lure a few unit troops down there and get them killed later. But to be honest, it's kinda just lazy. Like, what could Clara really need from home that would help with the mission? And whatever it is, I'm sure unit could provide it. Like, come on. However, the segment itself of Clara and the unit woman going down there was pretty great at setting up the atmosphere and tone of the scenes down there, and showing how mysterious the Zygons have been by setting up this base seemingly unnoticed. It's scenes like this that show how subtle the Zygons can be, that makes scenes like this all the more annoying.
The Doctor, Dr. Funkenstein.
Yes, we know who you are.
Good reference, but please stop having 12 give himself these names. This is the sort of shit writing for 12 that makes him feel a lot like 11. And it's not that 11 is a bad Doctor by all means, no, he's just inconsistent. But the problem is 12 is meant to be drastically different from 11. And in some of Series 9, the writers for some reason love to blend the characters together and it just doesn't work. And it's really disrespectful to Capaldi's talents as an actor, especially considering how much he brought to the role in Series 8 and 12 of a character, based off his acting alone. The strike gets aborted due to more shitty Zygon acting, and Kate arrives in a Breaking Bad flashback. I think these scenes are quite good at showing how much of an impact the Zygons have had on the world, and they are very intense, and Gemma Redgrave is great in all of these scenes. We get a good interaction between the Doctor and the What? I fucking knew that would- okay, I knew this would happen. I knew the second I wrote Colonel, because you know how that word's spelt. I know the second I fucking would go to read this word that I would read it wrong. I knew it the second I fucking wrote it. I'm such an idiot. We get a good interaction between the Doctor and the Colonel, which explores the effect that the Zygons are having on people directly, which was good for world building in the story. Unfortunately though, after an establishing scene with Clara and Unit, we get a really shit scene showing the Zygons' manipulation. But in order to have manipulation be well written, you need to have the opposition not be complete fucking idiots. And seriously, this scene would be so much better if every single one of these unit soldier weren't absolutely incompetent buffalos. Seriously, why the fuck does the soldier let it slip by that his apparent mother can't answer where or when he was born, but then when he asks a much worse question, she answers that one by saying she doesn't know? Bullshit, could someone be this fucking stupid? And to top that, every single one, yes, every single one of these mindless twits goes in the church to be killed. And it's more of the Zygons being stupid by acting so unearthly and robotic.
What the fuck? How can you be that dumb?
That entire scene was so fucking bad, my god! It could have been done in so many better ways as well. It's fucking infuriating to watch unfold because Why didn't he ask more questions? Why didn't any of the other soldiers ask any questions? Why didn't any of the other soldiers ask their loved ones anything that they might know? Why didn't the other soldiers say anything? Why don't they just wait until one of them has gone in to confirm that the church is safe before all of them go in? Why doesn't he shoot them on sight since he knows they're Zygons? Even if that one woman wasn't a Zygon, the rest of them are so obviously worse, so shoot them! The more and more I go through this episode, the more and more my faith in Series 9 dwindles. So the Doctor then tries to find Osgood in the stupidest way possible. Like, seriously, could you not just follow our voice? But to be fair to the Doctor, Osgood wasn't much fucking help either, considering she just keeps shouting Doctor and her name, and doesn't bother shouting directions. Malcolm was shouting directions. Then, this Zygon ruins his cover by screaming like a fucking orc before he just dies anyway.
I am human and Zygon.
Like a hybrid.
I do like that we never get direct confirmation of which Osgood it is, as it was actually quite interesting and develops nicely through the story. We then get a weird interaction between Clara and the unit woman before the reveal of Bonnie is shown to us, and this scene is excellent. However, like in Listen, I wish we didn't get those flashback scenes, as it sort of just bonks the audience on the head unnecessarily. Like, it would be so much better if we could just fill in these gaps ourselves, or if the story had set up that Clara had been kidnapped the entire time, that's why she had 127 missed calls. I mean, that makes a lot more sense than her going to ring the Doctor after saying she has that many missed calls and then ignoring them like a fucking idiot. But the plan itself of luring in all the soldiers and killing them is great, as I said before. Unfortunately though, we get a really obvious budget-saving shot when a Zygon confronts Kate. However, I do really like that it's left ambiguous whether she survived or not. It makes the episode very engaging and does make you want to watch next week. And the cliffhanger of Bonnie shooting the rocket launcher at the Doctor's plane is fucking fantastic! What an excellent cliffhanger to leave the episode on. Even though the last story with Unit did the same thing, but still. So, that was the Zygon invasion, and unfortunately this episode was so much worse than I remember it being. While there's some pretty great setup and world building in this part of the story, and Capaldi and the rest of the cast do a pretty good job in most of the scenes they're in, they can't save this episode from its truly bad quality. There is so much stupid shit in this episode, it makes it super annoying when you analyse every scene. And you realise so much stupid shit is going on in the cracks of this episode. Like the Zygons being fucking morons and being that terrible at blending in, even though it's their primary fucking purpose. And there's just some downright stupid moments involving the people in this episode making some fat-headed decisions in some scenes, which completely breaks immersion a lot of the time, along with a shit ton of nitpicks that pile up so quickly that it makes this episode super annoying to watch, as your immersion is just shattered constantly. While nowhere near as bad as the last two episodes I covered, this episode is still pretty shit, which is a shame, because if my memory serves me correctly, the Zygon inversion is actually really fucking good. So let's find out if I was right or not. I really hope I am.
God, I'm so mentally challenged.